Good morning, everyone. How are you all? Good, yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining our session today. I know it's like close to lunchtime and lunch is coming out, so we really appreciate you guys joining us. I'm Kathana Ganesh. I'm a security and solutions architect, and today I have with me Monica.
And I'm a security consultant with Global Financial Services.
So today we are talking to you about reducing cost through supply chain. And so this is the agenda we're going to be addressing today. So we'll start off by talking about some global current challenges. We'll talk about some of the trends across industries. So this is going to be on healthcare, retail, and also automotive manufacturing. We'll talk about some of the strategies for reducing costs through supply chain optimization. And we'll also highlight some of the features of supply chain, AWS supply chain. We'll introduce the service. And then we've got a case study followed by Amazon Q and how that integrates with all of this. And so starting off with global challenges, current global challenges. So we split this up into economic, environmental, and also operational. So since the pandemic, right, COVID-19, although it's now past, its long-term effects are still really visible within the supply chain industry. And so this is more talking about sort of the ports, the shipping, and all these routes have become incredibly congested as the demand surged in certain economies, whereas others lagged behind. And so when we talk about political instability, here we're referring to ongoing geopolitics, any trade disputes, and Brexit, for example, affected and impacted the UK-EU trade, and this also affected some of the supply chain routes. And then the other one is changing customer demands. And here what we're talking about is, the growing preference of moving towards sustainable and ethically sourced materials and products, and really the expectation of having a really fast delivery time. So now, we want things delivered to us within 1 hour, and it's just getting faster and faster there. When we talk about environmental, we're going to address regulations. So what we mean here is we're getting stricter environmental regulations, the EU Green Deal in particular, and it was launched in 2019. It's basically a set of policies whereby it's basically talking about reaching an ultimate climate neutrality goal of 2050. And this plays a big part in organizations because they've now got to cater for these regulations. And similarly with carbon pricing as well, there are lots of different policies out there which they aim to reduce greenhouse gases, especially carbon in particular. And so this is also a major factor within supply chains. And sustainability pressures, organizations now have to have this end-to-end visibility between your source and where you get your source materials, all the way until the finalized product as well. And so once again, this is adding into things. And then when we talk about operational, we're talking about scattered data across the various different systems. You could have an ERP system, you could have, various different supply chain systems. And it can get pretty inefficient, right? The whole decision-making process is a little bit more difficult because you've got lack of visibility. And once again, organizations are having to put in lots of time and also resources to consolidate all of this for a basic overview. And so looking at some of the trends across supply chain as well. So we are going to focus on 3 different industries in particular. So starting off with the healthcare industry. Once again, talking about the pandemic, it's really fueled an explosion of remote healthcare. And what I mean by this is more in terms of decentralized clinical trials. And so previously, when you had a clinical trial, the subject or the patient would then go into the medical facility or the hospital, they'll get the products, and then you do the clinical trials there. But now we're moving across to a phase where, your subject or patient is in the house and you're having to get the products over across to them. And what happens here is you've got complex shipment because, your products could be temperature sensitive, they could have sort of urgency. And so this increases some complexity as well in terms of you need sensors, you need targeted sensors to basically put on these products to track them, etc. Another big trend within the healthcare, which can also be quite scary, is that you've got your supply chains, and although they can be quite complex and intense, the facility or the ability to be able to actually find out if an item has been recalled or expired is pretty difficult, and it's quite outdated as well. So there's a scary statistic, and it says 24% of hospital staff have found out that they've seen a patient get a recalled or an expired product. This is pretty scary, right? Because if you have, an expiry date on a product, it means that it's not just there for a number, but rather it's for the efficacy or the purity of the product. And so this can pose to be pretty difficult and yeah, pretty scary in terms of just patient and also hospital in this scenario. So the other one we're going to talk about is retail. So I have a question for you all. So how many of you have actually ordered multiple sizes of the same product or the same item of clothing and sent it back? Any of you? Yeah? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, cool. It's not just myself and Monica. Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, this is interesting because the UK actually loses, the UK fashion industry loses about 7 billion annually just due to returns. So growing return rates is a big trend within the retail industry. And this is pretty difficult for these companies because they're losing so much and they're getting supply chain and particular products back into their supply chain. It's an unknown number, so they don't know how much is going back into the supply chain. And so you've got these organizations, I think Boohoo, Zara, H&M, for example, they have started to charge, or they will start to charge for returning products. And some of them are starting to use Gen AI features as well to sort of crunch this data, trying to understand why exactly it is that people are sending back products. Is it because the size is different, or if the color is not matching the description, etc.? So moving on to manufacturing and automotive. So here, this industry is actually the biggest and the most complex of supply chains in general. And this is because of the number of parts involved. I think most car makers have around 30,000 parts, which is a lot, and includes, the nuts and the bolts and everything really, really small. And oftentimes, when they send it to the customer, the dealers have a really hard time in actually tracking where these little parts are. And that can get quite difficult to manage as well. So nearshoring, so using a country that's close to you to source these materials rather than being dependent on countries that are further away is a major trend that we're seeing in this industry. So what are some of the strategies for reducing costs through supply chain optimization? So the first one is really visibility. And this is a point that we're going to be talking about a lot. And so visibility is critical for making these really informed decisions, especially in this fast-changing market. And so, AWS supply chain, and we'll talk about that a bit more, it gives you the ability to basically view this in real time. You're able to view, your logistics, your warehouses, all the operations, etc. And that means you can monitor performance, you can track inventory in real time, and it gives you that added benefit of just having better visibility overall. The other one being improved demand accuracy. So what we mean by demand forecast accuracy or demand forecasting, we mean the process of planning and also predicting goods and materials' demand to make sure that businesses can stay profitable as well, and profitable as possible. And so inaccurate forecasts can often lead to having too much excess inventory, having stockouts, etc., which can drive up costs massively. And the last one is optimizing inventory levels. And so what we mean by this is defined by the process of managing inventory to meet customer demands. So especially in the retail industry, when you have your peak season, so Black Friday, for example, you want to make sure you can optimize your inventory so that you're not holding too much inventory and that you're freeing up any capital that's tied to this. And so overall, while we're looking at the power of forecasting, we've mentioned inventory planning. Forecast planning for the workforce is also pretty important in terms of understaffing and overstaffing. Capacity planning as well, so it's another element where forecasting is quite helpful. And then you've also got financial planning as well, so you want to make sure that you can plan so that you can manage that top line revenue, you can predict what that might be by the end of the year. So to give you a quick highlight of what AWS supply chain looks like, Monica dives into it a bit more, but AWS supply chain basically gives you that visibility, like we mentioned, with the dashboarding, the analytics, etc. And it also has ML-powered insights to basically identify any issues that you might see within the supply chain. And the way that it works is it sits on top of an ERP or any kind of management system, and data is contextualized and loaded into the supply chain data lake, after which you can sort of produce some kind of visuals and you can do some dashboarding around that. Some additional features as well that you have with AWS supply chain is it can digest and ingest multiple data sources. And like we mentioned, we have the real time, which means you can access, what's your inventory, you can just go and check on there, you'll be able to see it all in real time. And another big element of it is also the analytics part as well. And so I'll hand over to Monica, my colleague and my friend, to talk about the review the recommendations.
Thank you so much, Kirtana. So one of the additional feature within the AWS supply chain is AWS Supply Chain Insights. AWS Supply Chain Insights allows you to alert your organization about the risk of overstock or understock of different products. So on the screen, we have an example of the company that is running low of the Honeycrisp apples within the Atlanta distribution center, and the risk time frame is 6 days. Within the overview section, you can see more information about these risks. So you can see, for example, like what is actually the shortage. You can also look into the current inventory to look into how much of the specific product is within that inventory, within that distribution center. And then you can also look into the protected inventory. So the protected inventory health is going to show you basically like how the distribution center is doing in terms of like specific product. And we can see that in terms of the Atlanta distribution center and the Honeycrisp apples, within the next 3 days, the health is in green state, then the following 2 days is in pink. And the last 2 days is like when the Honeycrisp apples is going to run low in terms of the stock. And the AWS Supply Chain Insights also gives you this cool feature to actually look into different resolution recommendations. So you can set up the resolution recommendations to look into, for example, into the distribution centers within like a specific radius of your impacted distribution center to just ensure that you can actually transport from one place to another. And in terms of the rebalance options that are going to be provided for you, there's going to be like different factors included. For example, the distance between the impacted distribution center and the one from where there's available stock. And then you also have the score, so the efficiency score in terms of like how efficient the choice is. You also have the sustainability factor, so like how much of the CO2 is going to be emitted when you actually transfer the stock from one place to another, as well as the shipping cost. So based on those rebalance options, you can actually make an informed choice on what kind of like rebalance options, like from where you want to like move from one place to another to make sure that there's enough stock within the Atlanta distribution center. You can also chat with other teammates about different rebalance options with the chat options in the AWS supply chain. So you can basically like write to the colleague and then talk about those options. Those options would actually be automatically sent to those colleagues just to ensure that you avoid any kind of like misinformation, miscommunication, so that they can see basically the same thing that you're seeing to make that informed decision. In terms of this service as well, the Amazon Insights refreshes the data every 24 hours or whenever you ingest new data to the data lake. So one of the examples of the companies that actually use AWS supply chain is Bauer Hockey. And Bauer Hockey specializes in the ice hockey equipment as well as the sport equipment. And like many other companies, they face challenges within the COVID pandemic. So they wanted to ensure that they can focus on the supply chain visibility as well as planning so they can be ready and resilient whenever the new next supply chain disruption event would occur. And therefore, they started using AWS supply chain, which it improved their forecasting models between 10 to 15%. And AWS supply chain service ensures that they listen to the customers and to the feedback, so they still keep adding like new features. And one of the features that was requested by our customers is Amazon Q within the supply chain. So if you don't know, Amazon Q is a Gen AI assistant within AWS console that helps you answer questions around AWS services as well as like how to configure different AWS services. You can also integrate Amazon Q with your IDE to get like any kind of like code suggestions or like security vulnerabilities remediations. And now Amazon Q is also available within the supply chain console. So you can chat with the Amazon Q and ask simple questions around your supply chain operations. So you can query questions like, is this product running out low of stock, or which distribution center have overstock of a specific product. You can also like query different like supply plans or demand plans, as well as you can look into debugging of the service itself. So you can, for example, look into like how you can improve the accuracy of the forecasting within the service, or how you can configure the auto replenishment within your service. So it's a very powerful tool to ensure that you can increase the productivity of your employees so that they can focus more on the decision making rather than focusing on querying data and like looking out for that data. So now that we've talked about AWS supply chain and its benefits, let's look into like how this whole service comes together. So first of all, AWS supply chain allows you to centralize your data from dispersed systems like ERP systems, your sales history and the spreadsheets. And then this data can be ingested into the supply chain data lake using data connectors. The supply chain data lake has a GenAI agent, which allows you to automatically do data transformation on that data instead of you doing it manually. So this way you can quickly start visualizing that data within different dashboards. So in terms of like the features available within the AWS supply chain, you can look into the inventory visibility, so the health of different inventories within your distribution centers, like what is the stock in different distribution centers, your network map. You can also look into the supply planning and demand planning. You can also look into the work order tracking, so you can actually have like this end-to-end visibility into delivery of your materials to your manufacturing centers. You also have the end-tier visibility, so you can connect with your suppliers to ensure that you can get visibility into like the stock of your suppliers so that they can provide you in a timely manner different orders. And on top of that, you also have the sustainability factor, so you can also check like how your, for example, suppliers are impacting your supply chain operations to ensure that you are environmental friendly with your supply chain operations. You also have this AWS Supply Chain Insights, which gives you this information around the risks associated with the supply chain operations, as well as the Amazon Q, which is the GenAI assistant that helps you with increasing the productivity and querying data in a quickly manner. Cool. Thank you so much for joining this session. If you would like to talk further with us about this topic, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. There's also AWS supply chain booth in the AWS section, I think somewhere there. So you can talk directly with the product manager himself, as well as the supply chain side. Thank you.